As we all know, the turmoil in Punjab in the 1980s and 90s ranks among the most catastrophic events that have shaped independent India's history. It has had a lasting impact on national and state politics and on people's lives. What really happened in those troubled years has been the subject of many books, and now we have an inside account by somebody who had a ringside view as a young IAS officer. In our next session, author Ramesh Inder Singh discusses his new book with veteran journalist Kanwar Sandhu and actor and politician Gul Panag. Over to you, Gul.
Can we have 2 more mics, please? I suppose so. I think that, whatever is your... Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. While I wait for my 2 illustrious guests to settle down, I think I can't tell you all how intrigued I was when Nilofer reached out to me to be in discussion with Mr. Singh on his book. A book I knew was in the making when my father read it at the manuscript stage, and remarked back then that it's the most incisive account, factually, of the period that all of us sitting in this arena right now have witnessed from some perspective or the other. I myself was a little girl between living in Punjab with my grandparents at Fatehgarh Sahib from 84 all the way till 86, and then in Chandigarh. So a lot of what you write here is witnessed by the precocious little child that I was. And I have had a range of mixed emotions reading this large volume, but it's been an eye-opener. And to be able to do this discussion with Mr. Sandhu, somebody I've looked up to for many, many years before we became formally acquainted and then also formally associated. It is indeed an honor to be on this stage with both of you. Thank you again. And thank you, Nilofer, for giving me this opportunity. It is a very sensitive subject, and people have very extreme views on the turmoil in Punjab. And as the subject of the book so carefully worded and titled Before and After Blue Star. So Punjab was already in turmoil by the time Blue Star happened and continued down a very, very slippery slope. So diving straight into it, you had just taken over charge in Amritsar, and 24 hours into your charge, you had, and I'm going to read this excerpt for a second. Here I was, not even 24 hours into my new job, dealing with 2 lieutenant generals camping in Amritsar, General Sundarji and General Dayal, and 3 major generals, K.S. Brar in the Golden Temple, J.S. Jamwal in the subdivisions of Amritsar, Ajnala and Baba Bakala, and Shamsher Singh in Patti, and parts of Tarantaran, along with thousands of troops that had swarmed the district with no possibility of communication with my seniors or juniors or my police. I'm just adding that, ad-libbing. Punjab had turned olive green, the Fauji color, and the khaki stood eclipsed. So this sets the stage for where I would really like to take this conversation. My father, in a blurb for this book, says that you have spared no one accountability, including yourself. Would you like to briefly delve into that?
Thank you very much, Gul Panag. And I'm very glad that Mr. Kanwar Sandhu is here, because I have quoted him also in the book. He was, for a while, used to visit frequently Amritsar, and I met him for the first time in Amritsar, and he has done very pioneering work on Blue Star. My book is not just on Blue Star, I'd like to clarify. Though there is probably no other book which describes the Operation Blue Star virtually on a half-hourly basis, how the entire battle, if I may use the word battle, developed and ended. Yes, there were mistakes, or rather blunders, I would say, at all stages of the entire turmoil in Punjab. The first was, of course, the Blue Star operation itself. And I have said so that it was ill-planned and very badly executed, which resulted in avoidable death and destruction. So far as your question is concerned specifically, what were the mistakes committed? And starting with myself, I would say that having joined on 4th morning, June 84, I learned about the armies is going to intervene in Golden Temple on the afternoon of 5th June. We were sitting in Kotwali complex in Amritsar, which is a town hall area where now you have the partition museum also, in the office of SPCID, because to add to what Gul has read from the book, you see, all telephone lines were cut. Army had taken over the exchange. The entire state was brought under curfew. There was no movement of any type. Consequently, even the deputy commissioner or the SSP of the district could not talk to each other. The only line provided to me was a line from the telephone exchange of Army. And when I brought it to them that I tried to reach my chief secretary, I tried to reach my home secretary, well, they said, please bear with it. It's just a day or two's problem. But if there's something very urgent, you can ring up the Army Exchange and we'll try and route your call to them. The first blunder, when I say blunder, was that after it had been agreed in a conference with the Army on 3rd and then on 4th, which my predecessor, Sir Gurdev Singh, attended on 3rd. I joined him because I was going to succeed him. It was agreed that the civilian population from around the Golden Temple will be evacuated. They asked us to arrange buses. We organized those. This was essential because long-range weapons had been brought in, like tanks, artillery weapons. So we feared, that if these weapons are used, there is going to be, because these are area weapons, as we understand. So on 5th, when we were told, I said, what happened to that? They said, it's too late, So we made an attempt at that time, because there was no telephone. I couldn't talk. I sent a wireless message to the chief secretary, to the home secretary, then talked on the police, this one-to-one, they have telephones, with Mr. Randhawa, who was then IG, CID Punjab. And he pulled strings and got back to me on duplex that yes, they'll give you some time, to make an effort. Of course, they said there's no time because there was exchange of fire of evacuating the civilian population or the pilgrims which had come to Amritsar, because on 3rd, curfew was imposed at 11 a.m. and that, as you know, was Guru Maharaj's Shahidi then. So a lot of pilgrims were caught inside the temple because of the curfew. So at that stage, we said, okay, all right, you try and talk to these guys inside. They tried to restore the telephone lines of the Golden Temple, but they could not. They said, these have not succeeded. Then Pandit Harjeet Singh, who was SPCID there, his family was converts to Sikhism, I would say, like all of us are at some stage of our ancestors. So he suggested that Dr. Baldev Singh, who was in charge of the hospital run by SGPC, he is the personal physician of both Sant Jarnail Singh Pindranwala, Sant Longowal and Toda, let's try and get him and send him inside, to talk to these boys and Sant Pindranwala. So when three of us, he, MPS Olak, most of you from this area will be familiar, would have heard his name. He retired as DG, one of the DGs of Punjab. At that time, he was in IB in Amritsar, originally at that time from Gujarat cadre, then changed to Punjab. So as we traveled, we found a tank firing, at these water tanks and the Ramgadiya bungas, which had been fortified by the militants. So we were stopped. We were not allowed to go beyond that. So the effort to involve Dr. Baldev Singh also failed. Consequently, the regret I have, or you can say my failure is, that I could not, evacuate this population. And there were over 300 houses, shops, etc. in the periphery of Golden Temple, which got damaged and destroyed. Many people died outside the Golden Temple because of the shells falling beyond the temple periphery. Well, there are many others, like when migration started out from Punjab, we did not...
Which you've written extensively about in the book.
And the other was that one couldn't provide really protection to anyone. Gyani Sahib Singh, who was the head priest of Golden Temple, he was shot while, climbing the stairs of Kantakar Deuri. And I was one of the first to reach because I was around and my car wireless set was on. I heard it on it and reached the hospital. And the first thing he told me was, DC Saab, thonu mein kya siga? No, I had no answer to it because he had said that I'll be, my life is in danger. But we couldn't. So there are many instances like this where we have failed.
That's very candid, I must say. But, I think how I'd like to, with everybody's permission, conduct this is that both Mr. Sandhu and Mr. Singh have been around Punjab and documenting, Mr. Sandhu has been documenting and writing and investigating a lot of what's happened in the period that led to Blue Star. And Blue Star was one chapter, a brutal one, and one incisive and catalysmic chapter that changed the course of Punjab's history thereon. But there were events that led to it. I've actually made a list of a number of subjects that I'd want both of you to speak on from your varied perspectives, yours with the administration, your ringside view, your insider view, and of course yours with your investigative nose and all the investigations that you've done, not just on Blue Star specifically, but the period leading to it. So let's start with the before. And I'd like you to, lead that one. And my request would be that when you give me an idea about the before and the happenings and the omissions and the commissions that led to say, Blue Star and the subsequent radicalization of a significant portion of Punjab's youth, I'd like you to also contextualize it with what's happening today. Because at the risk of repeating a very, very repeated quote, those who fail to learn from history are likely to repeat it. I would also like you to, when you summarize your brief point on the before part, if you could spend the last 10% of that time contextualizing that to what you may see today, which could potentially be a warning for us to prevent Punjab from going down that path again. Over to you.
Thank you, Gul. Before I come to the precise question that you have asked, I'd like to touch upon what R.I. just mentioned. There is no doubt about the fact that it is a very valuable book because it comes from an insider. There have been other books, but I think the only other book from an insider when it comes to only of Blue Star was by General Bragg himself, which he wrote immediately after the operation. But this book is different because it doesn't talk about only of Blue Star, it talks about the period before that and even after that, tracing to things even today. And also because he has referred to a very large number of other books to provide an overview of things. So it is indeed a very valuable book. but in his preface where he mentions that he was an actor, all right, but an insignificant actor. Now, I'm not sure if I agree with that, because when I was working on my documentaries, I must have done about 150 to 170 interviews. And I remember contacting him, and of course, at that point in time, he refused to join me in a question-answer session. Of course, I was very angry with him then. But that's besides the point. I think he was still in his job at that point of time. But I personally feel that he was an extremely important player in the whole thing, because the army, let's get it very clear, the army was requisitioned in aid of civil power. There was no martial law in Punjab. So since the army was out in aid of civil power, there is no way the civilian administration could wash its hands off whatever happened.
Even with the phone lines cut.
No, I'll just come to that, Gul, because as far as RA is concerned, he was the face of the civilian administration in Amritsar. But once the army had been requisitioned, you possibly couldn't leave, I would, sorry for using this word, a rookie DC, somebody who's just 24 hours into the job, to actually handle, as you rightly read out, 2 lieutenant generals and 3 major generals, right?
And the bullying kind. From every account that I've read, I think, not just this book.
That's right. And in this particular case, I think there was a failure, in my opinion, at the level of the governor, at the level of the chief secretary and the home secretary. What prevented the chief secretary of shifting to Amritsar at that point of time to handhold the deputy commissioner? He didn't do that. If the army commander would come in to handhold the then Dev commander, why didn't the chief secretary land up there? Why didn't the home secretary come there? Why wasn't the divisional commissioner actually asked to move to Amritsar in those days? In my opinion, why was the previous deputy commissioner allowed to go? You can't change horses midstream and just 48 hours before the operation. What was the urgency that he had to leave? Even if he'd
applied for leave in his defense very, very long back, and then I think he was made ineffective.
He was to go, but he left, I think, after the 10th. He continued to be in the country.
He left Amritsar on 4th. He flew out of India on 8th.
On the 8th. So he could have been asked to postpone the visit. After all, you see, let's get it very clear. The Operation Blue Star, obviously we're talking with the benefit of hindsight, today is being referred to as the third Kalukara. The first one in 1742, the 1762. Now, is this how the civilian administration should have behaved to an event of this magnitude? So I think it was, we have all been blaming the army. Of course, we'll come to the army. I think it was a totally botched up operation. We'll come to that. But I think at the very outset, as far as the local administration is concerned, I have, certain points on that too. I'll come to that later, when we move in the discussion. But at the outset, I think it was an unfair thing what was done, and I think it was equal failure at the level of the civil administration at that point of time.
If you permit me,
we'll be going over time, and if nobody has problem with that, I'm fine with that.
There is no doubt it was a failure of the civil administration. I have said so, that by khaki, though it means police, but it means civil administration. It receded. But let me give you a little background of how the decision to send the army was taken.
Can we come back to that, sir, when we discuss Blue Star?
Because it would be relevant to contextualize what his observations.
Fair point.
It was somewhere in the middle of May that the cabinet subcommittee decided, under Mrs. Gandhi's chairmanship, to storm the Golden Temple. Pranab Mukherjee has gone on record, he was finance minister at that time, that I protested. He said so in his speeches, he has said so in his autobiography. Anyway, decision was taken. On 26th May, Chief of Army Staff was called and told about this operation. But then Chief of Army Staff was also bypassed, he was not in picture, and the GOC Western Command was directly communicating with PMO. Governor B.D. Pandey was called on 2nd of June to Delhi and told about this decision. B.D. Pandey also, I am told, more important is that in his meeting with the Principal Secretary to PM and the Cabinet Secretary, when he was briefed, he was told that Director IB is going to join in the meeting. Please do not mention to him that army is going to storm the Golden Temple. And he has said so in his autobiography, you see. So, what to talk of the civil administration, even the intelligence bureau was kept out of it, I don't know for how long. And that is one failure why army could not get the complete intelligence inputs, you know, and I have said so in my book, and plan accordingly. And it's not I saying, Brigadier Guraya, you know him very well, he was Colonel Adam of the 15th Division and later on wrote a book on Blue Star, has titled one chapter in his book on Blue Star, Days of Army Rule. You know, it was a virtual takeover. And why it happened, let me tell you, is because of the decision-making process the way I have described, where a serving army general was brought in as an advisor to governor, and he took over the command of the civilian administration, a serving army general. Consequently, all others became irrelevant. The Home Secretary, after signing, proceeded on protest leave. The Divisional Commissioner Jalandhar proceeded on leave. Communication was cut. Decision-making was totally in the hands of the army, whether it was civil issues or the military operation. That is why in my book I have titled one chapter, on army, and I have clearly said that there is a time to redefine army-civil relationship, because in the good olden days, the provision was CRPC, where you requisitioned the army, and when the district magistrate did it. When district magistrate requisitioned the army, the section of CRPC says that army shall take directions from the district magistrate. Here, two enactments were made. Armed Forces Special Power Act and declared Punjab a Disturbed Area Act. With these two enactments, army was given complete power to raid, seize, fire, arrest, kill. Consequently, legally the civil administration had been bypassed. You know, that's all I'll say it here.
So much like what's happening in Kashmir, some people would allege and make that parallel actually. So I want to quickly go back to, and again, my request would be to be brief because there's a lot of subjects that I want your views on, and I'm sure the audience doesn't want to miss the opportunity of hearing two perspectives on the same subject. So can we briefly look at the before part? What, in your opinion, led to where we reached with Blue Star, with the Nirankari clashes and how they were dealt with, or whether there was justice done that was perceived to be done? If I could have your take, and how maybe there is a context in the present.
Absolutely. I think the whole issue started in 1978 with the Nirankari clash. I think R.I. in his book has gone into great details about it. That was the first incident which was totally mishandled. There was a fair amount of tension within Amritsar at that point of time. And despite that, a procession by the Nirankari sect and a convention by the Nirankari sect was allowed. Now, it led to violence, and R.I. mentions in his book that there should have been a judicial inquiry. But even the book does not come out with, does not answer many questions about it. One, for example, who allowed the procession and the convention at that point of time?
On Baisakhi.
On Baisakhi. This is 13th of April, 1978. And what was the CID input on this? He has referred that the CID report reached the Deputy Commissioner after the incident. But what about the SSP? When was the CID input given to the SSP, and what did he do about it? And when the clash actually happened, why were there no arrests? Why were the weapons that were fired not taken into custody? I raise this point because I have gone through the judgment in which the Nirankaris who had fired, as a result of which 13 Sikhs belonging to the two Jathas of Sant Bhindranwale and the Akhand Kirtani Jatha had been killed. These things went against the facts on the matter and actually led to the acquittal of the Nirankaris. Why was there no judicial inquiry, not even a magisterial inquiry into this incident? And when the decision of the Sessions Judge Karnal came out, there was no appeal. You had an Akali government in Punjab for almost 6 to 7 weeks, even after the decision which came on, I think, 3rd or 4th of January 1980. There was no appeal for almost 7 weeks, and then the president's rule was imposed. Now, this was the first failure. Even the SGPC did not protest at that point of time. And I believe they did not protest because by that time in 1980, a rapprochement negotiations had started between the Nirankaris and the SGPC on how the sect could be included within Sikhism. So this was the first failure. Had this been handled properly, had this been a judicial inquiry, what to talk of judicial inquiry? No action was taken against anybody in this case. And in this case, the Deputy Commissioner of Gurdaspur, who was a believer in, who was a follower of the Nirankari sect, happened to be present at the convention. Who allowed him to, did he take permission to do that? So I think there were, serious mistakes at Glore, and this is what finally led to, one thing and the second thing, and then.
I endorsed you. This was a failure of the civil administration. I endorsed you on that. Yes.
Right, there's agreement there then. And if you could just very, very, very briefly say if you feel there is anything which is in parallel today that we should be cautioning ourselves about. In particular, that not just this book, but so many books allude to the fact that there was a government in New Delhi that constantly sought to undermine the Akali Dal government of day. Was that context instrumental in any way in how the Nirankari incident, the Nirankari clash panned out?
In the broader context, at that particular time, we had a coalition government in Delhi and in the state. Janata Dal, I think, was in power, and Akalis were there. Even some leftist party was part of it. It wasn't at that particular time, but subsequently, yes, on issues like water, which contributed greatly to conflict in Punjab. In fact, that is where Akali Dal had launched its agitation, SYL. Now, the history of that is that case was pending in Supreme Court between Punjab and Haryana. At that time, Mrs. Gandhi had given such judge some division. So it was not implemented. Haryana challenged it. Punjab contested it. Dispute was going on. Morarji Desai, who became the Prime Minister, he convened a meeting when Haryana complained that you are not implementing the decision. He convened a meeting, but did not overrule the earlier decision. So the matter continued to be in Supreme Court. In the meantime, Mrs. Gandhi again came back. She forced Darbara Singh, and Bhajan Lal to withdraw that suit pending in the court, which should have been allowed, because judicial process, you have to accept it as it is final. And then herself gave an award, which Punjab refused to accept it, and then came to lay the foundation stone of SYL, which is today also you would have seen the newspapers, still a dispute which is going on, So these were the factors, the approach of the central government. And again to add, Akali's demands, they first time raised in 81. There were 45 or 40 demands. Ultimately, when the Morcha was launched in 1982, when Sant Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale joined Akalis, till that time Bhindranwale was not part of them. They reduced it to 10 demands. And there were 26 meetings. Mind you, not one or two, 26 meetings. And these were conducted, 4 of these by the Prime Minister herself. Rajiv Gandhi attended some. Harkishan Singh Surjit, the leftist leader, attended some. Sardar Swaran Singh, a towering Congress former leader, he presided over. Captain Amrinder Singh also negotiated twice. It was organized that he was to come and meet Pindranwala. Last minute, these meetings were cancelled. So, in so many years, 26 meetings, over 1 lakh of people in prisons by the Morcha, you know, the issue which could have been resolved across the table was allowed to fester.
So I'm going to come back to the issue per se and the color that it was eventually given. But before that, I want you to, you've obviously spoken briefly already about the Operation Blue Star as a view. But I want to give my personal perspective here and the problem of overly secular upbringing. I have tried on multiple occasions to get from my father, who some of you may know here, what really happened in Amritsar and the storming of the Golden Temple. And what was interesting was he would simply say, the army did what it had to do. Never once did he tell me that the operation was badly planned, executed, never once. The first piece that I really read, which was very, very well researched, was Hartosh Bal's in the Caravan magazine, which was titled The Shattered Dome. And I tell you, and as a Sikh, I was shattered to read that. And then I asked my father, and again he kept his loyalty to the organization, did not give me a response. But when I read this book, and I tell you, I don't need to be a Fauji kid to read and look at the Golden Temple plans here, which I printed out, because Mr. Singh's account of the Blue Star operation is so detailed that you simply cannot keep track of it unless you refer to a map, and you must tell them to include a map in the next edition.
It is at the back of the book.
Well, that's when they say, Puri Ramayan padhne ke baad. Well, my bad then. So I had to print another map because I completely missed it.
The last page is
Well, I wish I'd messaged you.
it's a colored.
Okay then. So clearly the moderator hasn't done her homework. But what I'm trying to explain is you really, really, really need to even if I had that there, I would need to print it out. To constantly. So anybody with a basic knowledge of logic could tell you that there were other approaches that could have been made to the Golden Temple. And I want you to come in again briefly on this. Do you think the operation was needed? Were there other ways around it? General Sinha had suggested a very, very viable alternative. And why wasn't the Akal Takht attacked from the back? So why don't you answer that question? If it had to be attacked, if we had to resort to that.
It was an absolutely botched up operation. The army was overconfident. They did not even go through the information that was available. The police had very pinpointed information about the weaponry inside. I have looked at a report of 13th or 15th of May, 1984. This is less than a month before the operation, by the SP's CID Pandit Harjit Singh. I think he had signed it. It gave exact details of the weaponry inside, even the fact that there are so many RCL guns, there's so many assault rifles, there are even 2 rocket launchers inside. That's the kind of information. And later, General Brad in his books writes that we were only told there are only 12 more guns inside, which is not true.
That book should be another discussion.
The army did not even look at the information that is available. And even some of the army personnel were disappointed themselves. For example, the Colonel Intelligence in Amritsar, Colonel Adarsh Sharma, he was called by the army and told to tell them about the various routes of the Golden Temple. So Colonel Sharma said, give me 10 minutes, I'll go to my office and fetch the details. He had taken these details from the SSP Amritsar. This officer told him, no, you don't have 10 minutes. If you can tell me right away, fine, otherwise forget about it. So Colonel Sharma was so disappointed, he never came back. He thought that, the army is not interested in knowing what had happened. So the army did not attack from the back, they did not adopt the top-down approach. They could have landed people on the buildings around and then they could have closed in. They even violated some of the basic rules of breaking up the army units. For example, this attack was primarily launched by Infantry 350 Brigade. And out of 350 infantry brigade, out of the 3 or 4 regiments, battalions that they have, only one battalion took part. The other battalions did not belong to this brigade. So even the unity of the brigade was broken at that point of time. Obviously, there were other alternatives, and General Sinha's option that, incidentally, there's a little background to it. Let me take 2 minutes. General Sinha, incidentally, was told in 1981 to take the surrender of Bhindranwale from the Gurdwara Mehta Chowk, Gurdwara Gurdarshan Prakash. The army had been moved to actually take his surrender. He actually, when he learnt about it, he called the army back and he spoke to the then defense minister that this should not be done. And if it has to be done, he'd like to speak to the prime minister before that. I mean, he took that risk of sorts, I would say. So finally, the government decided not to involve the army in taking the surrender of Bhindranwale. So with this background, General Sinha had left a detailed note in the army headquarters, in the Western Command headquarters. He was then the Western Army Commander, that should the army be required to raid or enter a religious place, this is how it should be done. He did not refer to the Golden Temple, but he was alluding to this operation, which obviously came to the notice, I believe, of the DGMO also. Later, when I spoke to General Sinha, he explained in detail how this would have been done in case, but this comes in the realm of what if. There is a very interesting book by Raleigh, What Ifs of History. Incidentally, General Sinha had been superseded. He had moved home. He had gone home. He was not in charge of the operation anymore. But he explained to me that what he would have done is imposed curfew, started an Akhand Path at the Darshani Dyodi, at the entrance of the Golden Temple. And this Akhand Path would have been in which the troops which were to be involved later to go into the Golden Temple would have been asked to attend this Akhand Path, primarily from either the Punjab regiment or the Sikh Ally and the Sikh regiment. And at the Akhand Path, now this is interesting. He says the Panch Pyaras, he would have wanted the Panch Pyaras, if the Takhat chiefs had agreed, fine, otherwise other 5 Pyaras, the 5 beloved ones, we have the tradition in Sikhism, they would have asked Sant Jarnail Singh to surrender, not to the army, but to the Guru Granth Sahib. This appeal would have been made by the Panch Pyaras.
But various requests to surrender had just completely fallen on his rather deaf
That's
ears.
right, but then Bhindranwale was somebody who was a religious person. I'm not sure how he would have refused this. But this is an option, what I say, which had a fair amount of chance to succeed. The other thing, as I said, again, this falls in the what ifs of history, is that General Sinha, incidentally, was very close to General Shah Beg Singh. The two were personal friends. They would refer to each other as country cousins. They were in communication. The last letter that General Shah Beg wrote to General Sinha was when General Sinha was superseded, exactly a year before the operation. So, if General Sinha had helped General Shah Beg Singh get his gratuity. So he was obviously, it was a long friendship, old friendship that they had. So in my opinion, I think options like this, there were other options which RA talks about, but this is an option which had a fair chance of success.
Would you like to come in on that?
Yeah, not only General Sinha, even General Nair, he was commanding a corps in Bathinda, later on became Lieutenant General. He has also written a book and mentioned what Kanwar has said on more or less similar lines. He was in the Directorate of Military Intelligence, Military Operations in Delhi also, General Nair. He says when we got, winds that army may be called, sometime in March 1984, Directorate General of Military Operations had prepared some outlines. General Somaya was at the time DGMO, and they had, passed on. But as again Mr. Kanwar has mentioned, these were probably not shared with the troops which were involved in the operation. These troops were based in Meerut. Suddenly they were called and told and go with a rider that no harm or damage should come to the Golden Temple complex. Now, when you put this rider, the point you raised, attack from backside, etc., They could have been Gurdwara, those who are familiar with Gurdwara Thada Sahib, and the opposite of it directly leads to Akal Takht. You don't have to go, such a, if I may use the term, through the pilgrim route, through the
Doing the full parikrama.
through the
trying to
parikrama.
reach.
So probably, the way it was, suddenly the decision was taken, the various constraints put on the army, the journals, all this resulted in this. And the journals in charge of the operation presumed that since they have fired tanks, they have fired artillery guns to demolish the high-rise fortifications of the militants, and such a large number of troops will go around from all sides, the militants will surrender.
The shock and the awe that General
Shock
Sundarji
and
was
the
looking
awe.
for.
It was a miscalculation. It was an equal miscalculation on the part of General Shah Beg. He presumed that army will not come, and if it comes, they will hold it back for a day or two, and in the meantime,
the public arrives and the
public will arrive. And consequently, a general like Shah Beg, who is credited to have created the Mukti Bahini, the guerrilla warfare organization, liquidated his entire top leadership by concentrating them at one point. This was a great strategic blunder on his part if we view it from their angle.
From their angle, true. So we've had our first warning bell.
Yes.
And
can you please take questions from the audience?
yes,
now
we
for
do
the
have
next
one more
15
topic to
minutes?
discuss, and we will discuss that topic. In fact, there's an A and a B. The first one is, when secular issues are given a ethno-religious character.
Yes.
So when we go back to the final demands of Punjab, and I won't call them the Akali demands because they were not Akali demands, they were legitimate demands by an elected government, which were reduced to 10 demands, which have been subsequently made by multiple other states in terms of upholding the federal character of the country. And when those secular economic issues are given an ethno-religious color, what happens? We most recently saw that in the farm protest, where it was reduced to a religious issue, where it was clearly an economic issue, because that's how governments do propaganda. So I need you to, and I please forgive me for saying I need you to quickly come in on the deliberate coloring of economic federal demands that were made by Punjab toward the center, and how that therefore impacted the course of things. And the second point that I want both of you to make, and I'm sort of combining both of these in the interest of moving on to the audience questions, is the role of the diaspora and the perceived foreign hand.
I think the Akalis made a fatal mistake when they shifted the Morcha. They had launched the Morcha in 1981-82. When they shifted this to the Golden Temple complex, I think this was done in August 1982. And they called it the Dharm Yudh Morcha. This was a Morcha consisting of the demands of the people of Punjab. So this was the first mistake they made. And a year later, the BJP, which had supported them in their demands, actually withdrew from the Morcha. Even after that, when the weapons started getting into the complex, I think in early 83, the Akali Dal should have actually withdrawn the Morcha, taken out the Morcha from the Golden Temple complex. They also had an opportunity when DIG Atwal, AS Atwal was shot in April 1983. And the killers came from inside the complex and went back into the complex. Now that was another opportunity for them to actually withdraw the Morcha or shift it elsewhere. Another important stage came about when Jarnail Singh decided to shift to the Akal Takht in December 1983, along with his armed followers.
But by then he was all powerful.
Yes, but if the Akali Dal had actually pulled out from that, it would have weakened his position considerably. Mind you, by that time, he was not taking on the Akal Takht Jathedar or the SGPC openly. Inwardly, yes, he would talk to some of us about it, but he was not taking an anti-position.
He was taking on Sant Longowal directly at all times by then.
Yes, but he was not taking an anti-position openly. So I think the Akalis were making a mistake by giving all this, first a religious color, And then subsequently, I think all this added to the military build-up within the complex. After January 84, I think it was a position of no return.
Do you want to quickly
No,
give
I
a take
agree
on
with,
this?
endorse him in what he says, absolutely. It assumed a religious color. Moment it shifted from Kapuri, where the agitation was going on for the SYL, to Golden Temple, you know. At that time, Akali Dal had its office inside the Golden Temple. Now they have moved out. So later on, of course, you know, when violence, became, too many killings took place, Akali Dal again failed to, they would condemn violence, but they would not blame, you know, individuals.
Instead, they actually formed something called the Marjivadas, which is the suicide squads.
Suicide squad.
You know, the Akali Dal had actually endorsed that.
We're running very quickly out of time,
So
and I have to
on
take
the
some questions. Foreign hand and diaspora.
Foreign hand. You see, diaspora has always played a very important role in Punjab. One estimate says that the number of Punjabis in Canada, for example, is in terms of percentage more or less the same as Punjabis in India. You know, you have more Sikhs in the Canadian cabinet than you have in Indian cabinet. In 1989, in the UN Security Council meeting, out of the 10 representatives, you know, which came to attend that meeting, 2 were Sikhs, and they were not from India. Nikki Randhawa was US representative, and Harjit, that defense minister, Sajjan, was the defense minister of Canada. See, so diaspora today is very important, and let me emphasize in the context of your other part of its, what are the implications for today. You see, Khalistan movement was never really resonated with common Sikh or Punjabi. Only there are surveys available, I have quoted those, only 5% of the people in 85, post Blue Star, post killings in Delhi, the people who supported Khalistan. Khalistan movement is dead, it's a microscopic minority, but what resonates with the people is human rights, you see. Human right violations, Khalra, for example, 4 or 5 legislative assemblies of Canada and America have passed resolutions, you know, condemning his killing. I hope you are familiar with Khalra's name. If not, please read.
Khushwant Singh Khalra.
A human rights activist, you see. A park has been named after him in Brezhnev, you know. So what I'm trying to say is that human rights issues are very important. And we unfortunately are, you know, let me not say more.
Do we have time for an audience question?
Consequently,
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
consequently, it is extremely important. And that I will briefly say, what is the future? Government has to give good governance. If you do not give good governance, you know, those basic factors or elements which led to the turmoil in Punjab, they exist even today, let me say that. And good governance means 2 things. Effective government, but not just effective, just government, which gives due to the people. So if you can give an effective government and a just government, that is good governance. If you ensure that, you see, like Kamalji ne dasega, Narankari clash, it was not good governance at that time, you see. Subsequently, to linger economic, political issues for almost 4 years into 26 meetings is not good governance.
And if justice was seen to be served, maybe it would have been nipped in the bud back
Nipped
then.
in the bud.
Seen
So it was
to be
extremely important.
Gul, see, good governance and also the long list of litany of demands that people have, which have not been
I think
listened to.
which come into the larger scheme of autonomous federal nature, which many states have, including Tamil Nadu, by the
Also,
way.
we've not been inquiring into various incidents, not only the Nirankari incident, even Operation Blue Star wasn't inquired into.
So to conclude, justice was never seen
Gul,
to be done.
Incidentally, even the British, after Jallianwala Bagh, they appointed the Hunter Commission to inquire into the Jallianwala Bagh massacre. I wish a judicial inquiry had been ordered into Operation Blue Star. and whatever happened after that.
Is there a mic in the audience? Can we get a mic to the audience? There's a gentleman in a two gentlemen in two blue turbans. Can we take your questions together? So, sir, your question, and maybe we'll try and make this quick, because I see, yes, sir, we'll come there as well. Yes, sir.
Okay, so having heard all that, having read Ramesh Inder's book, two questions come to mind. Of course, one thing is very clear, that these cowboys in the army, whether it was Sundarji, Brar, Dayal, I think they acted the same fashion as like General Dyer acted in Jallianwala Bagh. Even there, you know, there were gun-toting, hungry guys. Somebody mentioned about leave. I think Brar was supposed to go on leave, but cancelled his leave to be able to be part of this this attack on Darbar Sahib. Having said that, my one question to RI, I've asked him again. I think he's going to answer it. He has not answered it. Is that he was given the Padma Shri in 1986.
As were other gallantry awards
One
given
second,
to...
exactly. Yeah. So he was given the... no, this is for RI. The others, of course, the army is given to their people. Somebody mentioned it as a battle, as a war. Okay, if they consider it a battle against our own people, we take it. I mean, that's okay. We accept it. It was a battle. But, and if they want to give gallantry awards on it, it's adding salt to the wound, of course. And I'm surprised that those army gentlemen who took gallantry awards have accepted them.
But
in the
defense,
same
as an army daughter, sir, I have to say, when a man is given orders and he loses his legs while entering the parikrama, for no fault of his, so that's a very thin line.
Okay, whatever. I'm just asking, I'm asking RI that he was given a Padma Shri for administrative services in 1986. Now, him accepting that, administratively, he admits that he had almost, you know, delegated, I mean, he has no role to play administratively. But yet in 1986...
Noted. So your question is, why did he accept the award?
Secondly, I might add, Kanwar Sandhu, I think in his interview, when he did his series on the attack on Darbar Sahib, I don't call it Operation Blue Star because that's an army terminology. I call it a direct attack on Darbar Sahib. When he interviewed me, and he asked me, he says, what was the effect on your family? I also belong to an army family. As a matter of fact, my grandfather was the first Indian station commander of Kasauli cantonment. You see his photograph here.
That's why you have membership of the club.
Whatever, that's my privilege. But having said that, it was his comment after the attack on Darbar Sahib. He says, I do not belong to this Indian army. That was the...
Noted.
And therefore, his comment is that, and yet on the other side, the army goes and gives gallantry awards to its people who participated.
I'm going to have Mr. Singh address both his award and the gallantry awards from by putting on his government hat. Thoda swal. Hanji. He's given up his question. Can we have the mic, Hanji, here? Cheti pucho. Hanji.
मेरा सवाल यही है कि you have written a book in a quick succession in the last few months. 3 bureaucrats have written a book, GBS Sidhu and BD Pandey and you. And how you see we are living in a post-truth age. As Kanwar sir mentioned that Sikhs have considered it a Tija Kalugara, the Holocaust. And the narrative is being done by the Indian state. And how you see that scholarship, the Indian scholarship on Punjab problem, on Operation Army Attack, how you see that Indian scholarship majoritarily, where it stands, how it contributed to the fault lines we are witnessing even today.
Okay, can we take 2 more questions and then we can answer them? There, 3 questions and then we'll close the questions. You'll remember the question, sir.
Yeah, hopefully.
I will remind you.
I'm sorry, it's not really a question, but an objection to my dear Gul Panag, to one of your observations, that the general was I forget the word, was a bully.
It's from his book. It's not my observation because I wasn't there. I was in Basi Pathana, District Fatehgarh Sahib at the time.
He would have been a bully, no doubt. I had so loved him indirectly, but certainly to Mr. Gurpreet Singh, who calls the army cowboys, I'm sorry, success has many fathers, failure has none. Do you mean to say the army would have refused to go in if directed by the government?
The army is an instrument of state
I'm
policy,
sorry,
sir. I'm
one
well
minute.
aware of that.
Yeah. So we should not pass such facile remarks.
But no, sir, I
And-
don't think
no.
remarks have been passed. I think the fact remains that the operation needs to be scrutinized in the
Of course,
absence
it is
of a,
department, but
in
for
the
your
absence of an
information,
official report.
I was
The closest
posted-
we've come to, sir, is Mr. Ramesh Inder Singh's book, which is a factual account
No,
of
I'm-
how things happened because he
I'm
was
sorry,
there.
I have not read the book, so I'll
Please
give
do,
you-
sir.
Yeah. But for your information, I was posted in Amritsar for a good 2.5 years. But I was posted out about a month or two before.
Sir, I remain a very fiercely
No.
defender
What
of
I'm
the
saying
army,
is,
including
army
the
was
gallantry
already-
award, so we'll come back to
The
that.
army
I'll
was
Sir, your
address that
question.
also.
Just
Sir,
one
you're
second, I
right.
want to
You're
clarify.
right. Absolutely.
The army was certainly at fault. But to paint it with such wild remarks is something that's gone wrong in Kargil or Ladakh. You would have used the same
So I
word.
think you're directing your
Please.
ire to the gentleman there. We've addressed the army with
I-
utmost respect. And that's due as somebody who gives a...
Let me answer
Sir,
these,
your question.
Let me, Gul, if you...
Thank you.
Hello.
Sir, it's... Sir, a young officer is... Sir, absolute apology if you feel offended, but I'll give that to sir. We're talking about his book. Another question here.
Let me answer. Sir, I'll
Please.
come back to you. We have enough time. Better, please.
May I make a quick
Sir,
interjection, sir? Just
good-
a minute, please. Can we please limit our questions to questions? And you can maybe have a one-on-one conversation with those who've objected after this session.
You see, Gurpreet's queries, he's made two observations. First, about the army awards. As very rightly said by, I didn't get the name of gentleman here. See, army is a disciplined force. It acts on orders. It was directed to move, it was ordered to go in, it did. It could have been done better, yes. General V.K. Singh, who was Chief of Army Staff, has written his autobiography. He is now Minister. He has called Blue Star a ill-planned, badly executed operation. Lieutenant General Hoon, who succeeded Sundarji as GOC Western Command, he says Blue Star was as brutal as Jallianwala Bagh. Please read his book, you see. So it's not just A or B or C saying so. It is army journals, you see. But let's not get into that controversy because in a discussion, there could always be two opinions. But to answer Gurpreet, army was ordered and it suffered casualties. There is a difference in the figures
Major
given
Raina.
by...
Could you talk about Major Raina?
Difference in the casualties of the army, figures given by General Bragg and later on mentioned by General Hoon. Hoon says almost 300 people, armed forces, died. Of course, he includes paramilitary into it. Now, I'll give you one example where you can judge whether army should be awarded or not. A young captain from Guards, Captain Raina, he entered Golden Temple. He suffered because the weapons were sighted very low, by the people inside. So he suffered large number of bullet wounds on his legs. Ultimately, both the legs had to be amputated. Now, should such people who risk their life, their services be not recognized by the state because state had ordered them to go in? You see? I leave it to you. Opinions can differ because this is an extremely...
Can I come in?
Extremely, polarizing issue.
Yeah.
Sir, just give me 1 minute more.
Okay.
Regarding the award of Padma Shri, it's relevant in the context of today's event because Khushwant Singh was among first few to give up his Padma Shri.
Padma Bhushan.
No, sir. Padma Shri.
No, Padma Bhushan. He
Padma
gave up.
Bhushan.
And then he got
Okay.
the
Now,
Padma
I'm coming to
Vibhushan.
that.
Yeah.
Now, he writes, and I have reproduced it in my book, that he got thousands of letters and telegrams and, and he says every message from a Sikh commended him. And every telegram and letter from a non-Sikh called him names. That was the kind of polarization which Blue Star brought in, And it is unfortunate it happened. Such decisions have to be taken very carefully, India is an extremely pluralistic society. And you cannot unite India by dividing India. You see, if you study my book, you will find that throughout all players, they were playing games of power politics to gain power, whether it was Akalis or it was Congress. There were groups within Akalis, there were groups within Congress, each trying to fight each other. You see, to outwit the other.
It goes on today as well.
And coming back to why I accepted my award, I was given in 1981, so was my successor Deputy Commissioner given, so was the police officers given. As you yourself said, it was for administrative services, not for Blue Star. My role in Blue Star is given in my book. If you have any contrary views, I will welcome it. But let me add to this. When you are in a service, you are governed by your conduct rules. The option before you is to stay in service or quit. Two of my colleagues quit. Simranjeet Singh Man. Second was my own batchmate, Harinder Singh Khalsa of Foreign Service. He was posted in Norway. He deserted the Chancery, embassy. Both of them became MPs, So the option before me was to go to Lok Sabha or retire as Chief Secretary.
You can still go to Lok Sabha. You can still go to Lok Sabha. Thank you, sir.
Gul,
Thank
can
you,
I come
sir.
in?
Absolutely. Thank you so very much.
I prefer to be within my
Gul, 2 minutes.
rules of conduct.
2 minutes for cover, and then we must
Absolutely,
start.
Rahul. Absolutely.
I think this is a very sensitive issue on which the government will have to take a call. We have had incidents, we've had such operations which have been where people have been awarded, and it has always led to bad blood. Even in this case, I don't know if many of you know that when it was decided to give the gallantry awards for Operation Blue Star, the then President Gyani Zail Singh expressed his displeasure, and he actually first almost refused to give the gallantry awards. Finally, via media was worked out, and the word Operation Blue Star was actually taken out of the citations. So if you read any of those citations, I think there are 5 Ashok Chakras, a couple of Kirti Chakras and Shaurya Chakras which were given. Incidentally, we just talked about about Captain Jasbir Singh Raina, who lost both his legs. One of my team members, when I was running a TV channel and I was making the documentary, interviewed him. So he said, I'm not sure if this award should have been given to me. I was given this award, but I have never won it even once. So that's the kind of a situation that actually exists on matters like this. But I think a final call will have to be taken on whether, when you are operating against your own people, whether such award should be given or not. I've seen officers, which is very sad, officers who are posing with dead bodies. Even in Operation Blue Star, there are pictures of people who have posed with the dead bodies. It happens in Kashmir, and a lot of people, locals, do not like this kind of a thing. But at the same time, when you're talking about the role of the civilian administration, I'll just come back to that for half a minute. I personally feel, given the magnitude of this operation, I think the civilian administration should have taken a much stronger view. This was not an ordinary operation. In 1984, on the 3rd of June and the 4th of June, there were 2 meetings where the civilian officers, which were attended by the civilian officers, these are presided over by General Barad, where one of the officers, DIG BSF, Gurdial Singh Panther, put his foot down. He said, there is no way we're going to do this kind of an operation. He was asked to fire upon the Golden Temple. He said, there is no firing from inside. Why should I fire on them? And finally, he had to be moved out. if more officers had put their foot down, I think the army people would have been forced to take a different recourse.
Right.
This
Thank
is
you.
my view.
Thank you, Kanwar. Thank you very much. I'm
Thank
sorry
you
to
very much,
interrupt,
ladies and
but
gentlemen,
Thank you
for
very
being a
much.
fantastic
Thank you.
audience. And even those who disagreed entirely with the discussion, the purpose is to provoke thought. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Yes.
Thank you very much, Gul. It was very nice.